river Tiber passes in its course the immortal city whose origin, legend tells us, dates from the time of Romulus and Remus, the infant princes that had been set adrift in a basket by a thief who had stolen their kingdom. Instead of drowning, they were saved by a mother wolf who nursed them and kept them alive. One of them, Romulus, founded a city where they had been saved and named it Rome after himself. Let us take you to this city and show you some of its ancient and modern glories. Above one of the oldest bridges of Rome rises the castle of St. Angelo. The massive structure was built in the 2nd century by the Emperor Hadrian as a tomb for himself. Because of its situation and huge proportions, it was used for centuries as a fortress. Above it, the Archangel Michael sheaths his sword, as Pope Gregory visioned him at the end of the Great Plague, the sign that the wrath of God had ended and Rome would be spared. This vista of the castle, the Tiber, and the Church of St. Peter is one of the outstanding views of the immortal city. On the site of Nero's garden, where his house of gold and his colossal statue stood, is the greatest monument of Rome, the Flavian Amphitheater, known throughout the world as the Colosseum. For centuries, the Colosseum, which seated 50,000 persons, was the location of Rome's greatest spectacles, and it was a structure of wondrous beauty. All of its marble has been pillaged, and much of its stone has gone into other buildings, but you can still sit in the places where Roman emperors once sat when they watched gladiators battle. The floor of the arena is gone, but you can see its foundations and the walls of the cells below where wild beasts were kept before they were turned loose in the arena to destroy each other or tear to pieces the martyrs that were thrown to them. In the days of imperial Rome, triumphal arches were erected to celebrate great victories. The largest and best preserved is the Arch of Constantine, which commemorates the battle between Constantine and Maxentius at the beginning of the 4th century, the victory that assured right and protection to the followers of Christianity. The Arch of Titus was erected to celebrate the destruction of Jerusalem and the victory of Titus over the Jews who had rebelled against Roman rule in the eastern part of the empire. The inside of the arch is decorated with scenes of his campaign. Through the Arch of Septimus Severus, we look into the Roman Forum. In ancient times, this area, a valley between the Esquiline and Palatine hills, was a convenient market and trading place for the Romans and Sabines who occupied the two hills. After their union, the area gradually became the commercial, political, and religious center of the new city. In the Republican era, the markets were moved and courts of law and fine buildings took their place. In imperial times, Augustus carried out the plans of Caesar and the Forum was enlarged. As the empire grew, taxes and conquest made Rome the richest city in the world, and millions were spent to erect triumphal monuments and temples to gods and to build marble palaces for the rulers. In time, the Forum became the most magnificent sight in the Roman Empire. As the empire fell apart, decadence set in, and fire, invasion, earthquake, and neglect completed its ruin. During the Middle Ages, some monuments were turned into churches. Others were pillaged for marble or overgrown and forgotten. Only in the last century were excavations begun and monuments that could be re-erected. What history this place has seen, what glory, what despair, the rise and fall of a great empire. There are other fora in Rome. Caesar, Augustus, Nerva, Vespasian, and Trajan each built a forum for himself. In Trajan's forum still stands the fine column erected to commemorate his victories. The column is made up of blocks of marble and bears a spiral band of reliefs more than 200 yards long, depicting episodes from Trajan's wars. On top there was once a statue of the emperor. Today, St. Peter in bronze looks down upon the ruins of the once great Roman city. Since the first Jubilee in the year 1300, Untold millions of devout Catholics have made pilgrimages to the Eternal City to visit the spot sacred to them. Once in every 25 years, they make the journey to receive the Holy Year indulgence that is granted to the pious and repentant. It is said that all roads lead to Rome. Today, air roads lead there too. No matter the year or the season, there is no better way to reach the immortal city than aboard an Air France Constellation. While we glimpse some of the activity around an Air France plane at Rome's airport, let us tell you a bit about Air France, one of the largest and oldest air services. Air France offers the finest in luxury travel. Her planes fly all over the world. From the United States, there are regularly scheduled flights leaving New York and Boston for Rome. When you make your journey to Rome, you can travel direct by Air France with no changing of planes, or you can stop over and visit Paris en route. Your trip overseas will be made in the newest type, longest range Constellation, with power and fuel in reserve for extra dependability, and guided by airmen who are veterans of overwater flying. Pressurized cabins ensure comfort for above weather and above mountain flying. And at 5 miles a minute, Europe is just overnight from the United States. Whether you have only a few weeks or plan a long stay, you will spend less time traveling and can have more time in Rome and all Europe if you fly Air France. It is economical too, for special rates prevail during many months of the year. Yes, you can easily afford now that pilgrimage or vacation in immortal Rome. We have shown you some of the monumental antiquities of imperial Rome. Let us now see something of her modern side. The Via Impero, leading to the Colosseum, is the triumphal avenue of present city. Victor Emmanuel's statue overlooks the capital of the kingdom he made possible. The Piazza Venezia before us recalls memories of the dictator who destroyed that kingdom. The Corso, which leads from the piazza, is one of the principal financial and business streets of Rome. Traffic, even in the narrower streets, moves along smoothly, for it is well directed by white-gloved police. Many of the streets in downtown Rome are quite narrow, and pedestrians and motor scooters compete with autos for the right of way. Some sidewalks are wide enough for only two to pass. Hanging awnings on them add to the pedestrian's problem. You'll be surprised how many fine new buildings and splendid modern streets Rome has. There is charm and much color in many of the older sections of Rome. Rome is famous for her fountains. When water is scarce, the Trevi fountain and the larger ones don't play, but the small ones do. The column of Marcus Aurelius is in the heart of modern Rome. Some emperors erected monuments to commemorate their wars. Others brought them back from their conquests. Egypt contributed obelisks, and the stones of the pharaohs are now the pedestals for crosses. The Capitoline Hill, so closely associated with the centuries of Roman history. Here are the buildings of the oldest art collection in existence and the famous statues of the twin gods, Castor and Pollux. In the center of the square is Marcus Aurelius, one of the best emperors Rome ever had. Here too are the famous twins, Romulus and Remus, and their legendary nurse. Part of the Capitoline Hill is occupied by the monument to Victor Emmanuel, under whom the unity of Italy was achieved. The superb memorial is surmounted by statues in bronze and gold. figures in marble are carved above the tomb of the unknown soldier of Italy's First World War. His guard of honor almost as still as the stone. Since the days of the Emperor Constantine, when churches began to replace temples, Rome has gone steadily forward as the spiritual leader of the world. After the downfall of the Roman Empire, Rome rose again because Christianity survived. As the centuries passed and Christianity spread, Rome's influence grew, and today her religious supremacy is felt throughout the entire world. The oldest church of Rome is the Pantheon, built 27 years before the birth of Christ as a temple to all gods. 600 years later, it was converted into the Church of St. Mary Martyrs in memory of the bones of the martyrs brought there from the catacombs. Within, where the kings of Italy are entombed, the only illumination comes through a round opening in the huge dome. The greatest church of Rome is St. Peter's. Its dome, over 400 feet in height, can be seen from all over the city. The most unusual view is through an iron-bound door on the Aventine Hill. Putting your eye to a round hole in the door, you see the dome of Michelangelo perfectly framed by the tiny opening. If you are a Roman Catholic and are visiting Rome on pilgrimage, you will go often to the great church and receive the blessings of your faith. If you are not Roman Catholic, you will still want to attend at least one service in the largest church in Christendom. When you are in Rome, you cannot help but realize the important part religion plays in the life of all the people. During holy years, the city will be crowded with pilgrims of different races, customs, and tongues. Like millions before them, they will come to the holy city from all over the world to receive the indulgence that is granted to those who adhere to the conditions that are decreed by the Holy Father. When you are in Rome, you will come upon many religious processions. Some of them will be elaborate and very impressive. Others will be simple. There are more than 400 historic churches in Rome, and many celebrations are held in them throughout the year. The day of her confirmation is a memorable day in the life of a Roman girl. First Communion and the beginning of their service to the church comes early in the lives of children. Pilgrims to Rome to gain the Jubilee indulgence must visit on the same days the 4 major basilicas of the city. St. John Lateran, the Cathedral of Rome, the first great gift of the Emperor Constantine, is one in which it is required that Holy Year penitents must worship. Within are preserved 2 of the holiest relics of Christianity, the little table used by St. Peter as his first altar, and the table at which Christ and his disciples sat for the Last Supper. The Holy Door is one of the 4 in Rome which are open only during holy years. A second patriarchal church is Santa Maria Maggiore. 152, the Virgin appeared in a dream to Pope Liberium and told him to build her church where snow would fall that night. It was found that snow had fallen on the Esquiline Hill, and on that spot Santa Maria Maggiore was built, carrying the flag. His saint inside the walls. By many, this is considered to be the most beautiful church of Rome. It rises above the tomb of the Apostle St. Paul, one of the first Roman citizens to accept Christianity and to teach its doctrines in pagan Rome. Paul was beheaded for his teachings, and when Constantine embraced Christianity, he ordered a church built above the grave and the body placed in a casket of bronze and buried below the high altar. The emperors Theodosius and Valentinian II constructed a huge basilica on the same. Basilica was partly destroyed by fire in 1823, but within 30 years it had been completely rebuilt through gifts that poured in from all over the world. The holy door is the same that has stood nearly 1,600 years, for it was spared by the great fire. The interior is superbly decorated with marble and mosaic. Since the day of his execution and martyrdom, the sword has been the emblem of St. Paul. Let us return to the most important patriarchal basilica, the largest church in the world, St. Peter's. Since the Lateran Treaty of 1929 between the Holy See and the Kingdom of Italy, St. Peter's and about 100 acres surrounding it have become Vatican City, an independent state under the sovereignty of the Pope. Small though it is, it has its own railway station. And a beautiful state office building. Much of the city is covered by the vast Vatican Palace with its miles of galleries and art collections. Here too is the Sistine Chapel and the residence of the Pope. Swiss guards dressed in the uniforms designed by Michelangelo stand watch over the small princely state. Part of the Vatican City is occupied by the hill and gardens where the popes remained voluntary prisoners from 1870 to 1929. Beneath this covered walkway, the Holy Father takes his daily exercise. The garden is beautified by trees and flowers. When you walk in the gardens, you have many attractive vistas of the great dome of the cathedral. Beneath it are the mortal remains of the first vicar of Christ. Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. From the top of the great dome, you can look down upon all Rome. 400 feet below you is the square of St. Peter, where 400,000 persons can gather at one time. The square of St. Peter's is partly enclosed by a colonnade designed by the great Bernini. Rising above one side of the colonnade, we see the residence of the Pope. If you were to count them, you would find there are 284 columns. There are 4 rows of them so arranged that at a particular spot on each side of the square, the 4 rows appear as a single row. In the center of St. Peter's Square is the Egyptian obelisk brought to Rome by the Emperor Caligula. Where it stands was once an arena in which thousands of Christians were tortured and slain for the pleasures of the mad Emperor Nero. And here St. Peter was crucified head downward. As we look upon the great cathedral which rises above the tomb of the apostle, recall that the Emperor Constantine was present when the foundations were laid, and that he dug the first 12 baskets of earth, one for each of the apostles. The church which he built stood 1,100 years before its walls began to weaken and it had to be taken down. This noble building with its great dome designed by Michelangelo took 175 years to construct and is the largest place of worship on earth. Here, while we look upon the beautiful fountains of the Piazza of St. Peter and the dome of the greatest church of Christendom, we take leave of you and trust that we have been able to bring to you, through our picture story, a better knowledge of the great city that through the ages has witnessed so much of the history of the world, a city that so deservingly earns its name, Immortal Rome.